I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are Velocities of Music. This is our podcast. And today we would like to do another artist deep dive. And a couple podcasts ago, we did Modest Mouse's discography and their impact on music, did a deep dive through Modest Mouse. And part of the reason why we did that was because Modest Mouse to us, to Jake and Tom of Velocities of Music, is the quintessential band to listen to in autumn. And another band that I think, or an artist that really fits that category, that mood, that vibe, the really orange leaf trees and like cloudy, rainy day, cool sort of autumn vibe is Nick Drake. Mm-hmm. Nick Drake. Tom, first of all, before we get started, can you give us some background on who Nick Drake was?
Sure. Nick Drake was an English singer-songwriter. I mean, I feel like the singer-songwriter label comes with a lot of baggage, but that's what he was. He was a singer. He was a songwriter. He amazing on the guitar, mm-hmm. Great finger-plucked kind of folk guitar. And he started his music career when he was very young. And I mean, mm-hmm. It wasn't really this big
he was
thing.
Like in college.
Right. He wasn't a big showman or anything. He just kind of wrote some songs on his own, very meek, kind of quiet character. It got into the hands of the right people. They wanted him to record a record. And so he was like, well, okay. And so
mm-hmm.
he did.
Mm-hmm.
And that first record ended up being 5 Leaves Left.
Yep. And Nick Drake's whole style, he first of all, he came from an English family, and like his mother was a songwriter. I think his father played music as well. And kind of grew up with music, kind of like mm-hmm. somebody sitting in this room with me. Tom's dad wrote a lot of music when Tom was a kid. So he was exposed to that growing up, and then became and would just like was known for just carrying around a guitar, and he was kind of withdrawn. Guy suffered from clinical depression, and spoiler alert, but eventually was or is reportedly had committed suicide. Uh-huh. We'll get to more of that later, but he was known for just walking around and carrying his acoustic guitar and just doing his now very well known finger picking style, and just he'd finger pick these riffs over mm-hmm. and over again. And when you think about like that description of who he was, very quiet, reserved, kind of withdrawn from society, and then the image of that guy, this skinny guy, tall with long hair, just sitting there and just always being quietly just playing on his guitar over and over again. When you think about that and then listen to his music, you really like it's almost creepy at times. It right?
is. Like you almost feel like it's a kind of music and a part of his personality that wasn't meant to be recorded.
Right.
I mean, thank God that it was.
Yeah.
But it almost feels like an intrusion.
Right.
It feels voyeuristic.
Yeah, it really does.
This is a glimpse into Nick Drake's soul, and the fact that he's letting you see that is, it's almost kind of off-putting at times.
Yeah. So his first album, Five Leaves Left, with came out in 1969.
Yeah,
1969.
Which one of the many reasons 1969 is one of the best years of music ever.
Yeah, but the people who were listening to music in 1969 probably didn't listen to Five Leaves Left.
Right. His albums were not very critical or commercial successes.
Yeah. Sold just like a few thousand
uh-huh.
copies, and there was no digital distribution back then. So
right.
that's all he got. I mean, this guy was poor and broke, and he was
right.
very young. He was in college, so he didn't have a lot going for him
mm-hmm.
outside of his amazing talent to write great acoustic
right.
songs.
But it never really got recognized in his time, and I think that's one of the greatest shames of the 20th century, honestly, in music, is that Nick Drake was not really, acclaimed in his time, because I just think he's absolutely mm-hmm. incredible, and I mean he's gone on to get the attention that he deserves, or really not even up to that level, I think, in more modern times. But at the time, I mean, he was a depressed, very quiet, reserved fellow who wrote some of the most amazing songs that I think you'll ever hear.
Mm-hmm. Now, on 5 Leaves Left, Tom, first of all, how would you describe this album to those listening?
Sound?
Yeah.
I definitely say folk, kind of folk rock,
sure.
folk pop.
Sure.
I mean, however you'd want to say it that way. I mean, to me, guitar is the big focus.
Yeah.
But 5 Leaves Left, why is that so hard to say?
I don't know. It's a
five
mouthful.
Leaves. 5 Leaves.
It's the double V. The VL.
Right. 5
Velocities.
5
of music.
5 Leaves Left. It also had some string accompaniment, a little bit of varied instrumentation, but still very focused on this somber kind of mood. And what Nick Drake was a master at was making his songs fit his vocal style. Some artists, I feel like you listen to them and they're trying to strain their voice. They're trying to strain. You can tell basically what they're doing doesn't feel natural to them. Nick Drake has this silky smooth, just heartbroken voice. And he wrote songs to match that. He wrote songs within his range and within his emotional depth. And that just, it communicates so well and conveys the ideas that he's really going for in his writing.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think makes Five Leaves Left such a great and melodic record is, as Tom said, it's all about the guitar. And Nick Drake's, those repeated finger-picked parts are just so infectious and beautiful, and that's clearly what the whole song is around. And then Nick would add his vocals on top of that. But when the producers came through and added the string backings, right? Like I'm thinking of track 2, Riverman, which is really the centerpiece of the record. This is songs in 5/4. It has this very hypnotic kind of groove to it, and it has this this repeated acoustic guitar line, but then there's this main melody of strings that comes through, and it kind of differs from the vocals. Like it's kind of like they're moving in unison, but they kind of take different melody lines, and it's a really interesting composition. And you see that throughout the album. You see a lot of those melody lines where the strings will actually take on a different perspective of the melody than the guitar, the vocals, and the triad there, I think, is really powerful. Now, this actually used to be my favorite Nick Drake album.
Really?
I don't blame you. Yeah, for a long time, like this was my favorite Nick Drake album. I could not get enough of it. But this is back in the day before Spotify, so I had somebody had, and I'll admit this, I had a burned copy of it, right? And it was missing track 7, Thoughts of Mary Jane.
Oh, really?
And I loved Five Leaves Left, but when I finally got the actual version, and it had track 7, Thoughts of Mary Jane on it, totally changed my view of this album. And actually, I like it less because of that song.
Wow.
Not that Thoughts of Mary Jane is a bad song. I just don't feel like it fits very well on this record. This record is very austere, almost kind of creepy at times, very melodic, and even it's dark. It's just this
gloomy.
Gloomy is the perfect word. It's a gloomy record. And here at you get to Thoughts of Mary Jane, and it's kind of bright sounding, and you have this flute, and it's just so cute and happy, and it doesn't fit at all with the rest of the songs. And you get more of that song on Brighter Later, the second album.
Absolutely.
And I feel like Thoughts of Mary Jane would probably fit better on that record.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of where the style went. I really love From Five Leaves Left. I love Way to Blue.
Oh, that's a great
song. Focus on the strings, and you can just picture Nick Drake just kind of crooning over them. But God, his voice is just perfect.
Yeah. Also, Man in the Shed, Fruit Tree, both great tracks. I mean, the whole record, every single song on this record is just. I'm awestruck when I listen to this. I just want to press play again when the album finishes. And even with Thoughts of Mary Jane, which is a good song, don't get me wrong, it's still a wonderful record. It just may have been supplanted by a record we'll talk about a little bit later. But let's get into Nick Drake's second record, Brighter Later, which was recorded and released in, was recorded in 1970, released in 1971. This is the Nick Drake record I'd say I like the least.
I agree. It feels a little overdone, and Nick Drake certainly thought that at the time. Yep. But you were talking about on Thoughts of Mary Jane, kind of that flute. It almost makes me think of I Talk to the Wind from King Crimson's debut, or some of the stuff that the band Love was doing in the mid to late 60s. It's brighter, which is kind of funny given the name of the album.
Yeah. It's aptly named.
It feels brighter than it should be, because if he has this kind of sad clown vibe to it, like where at heart he was suffering, he was in despair, and yet he's kind of being forced to do this thing and play this game with this kind of bright, upbeat music. And listening through it, you can really tell that it's not in his heart to be doing that kind of sound.
Right.
But it's what they wanted him to do, and it's really kind of a shame because the album is still brilliant.
Yeah.
It's still great because nothing any producers could do could overshadow Nick Drake's just songwriting and performance brilliance.
Yeah.
But it sucks because you listen back to it and you're like, man, this probably even could have been better. Right. And it's funny because you look on like All Music, and all 3 of Nick Drake's albums have 5 stars.
Right.
At one point, I think this has changed in the last time they did this, but I know in older versions of Rolling Stone magazine's top 500 albums of all time, all 3 Nick Drake albums were on there, and they totally deserved to be.
They deserve to be.
But it's funny that Brighter Later is kind of this like runt of his musical career, so to speak, in my opinion at least, because it's still great. But I'll tell you what, I talked to a lot of people who have varying opinions on Nick Drake, and you hear every single one of his albums being posed as the favorite. And I couldn't disagree with any of those. While I have my own opinion, and yes, Brighter Later is my least favorite, still, if someone says that it's their favorite, and I can't fault them for it.
Yeah, and I would agree with everything you said there. And I'll admit, like, I still go back and listen to it from time to time, and I find it enjoyable, but it's just not as engaging for me. But like you said, a lot of people really love it, and it's their favorite. So it's not to take away from what he did accomplish there. To me, it just felt like it's an album that wears a little bit too much makeup, right?
Yes.
And goes fake baking a little bit too much. Like, it doesn't feel authentic, and it doesn't, like, its natural beauty that you can tell is there is kind of hidden behind all of this production that was added on top of it, and it's just a little bit over the top. And I think Nick realized that, and I think that it was so far out of his comfort zone that to take a step back, Five Leave Left came out, and the producers thought the album was great. He started to go on tour. Guy went around and started playing these little local pubs and stuff like that, and just like couldn't get the audience to shut up, like he couldn't concentrate, and just his personality, his depression, he could not handle that, and got to a point where he just said, screw it, I'm done, and said, I'm done touring. So he quit touring, and his record label, he hadn't sold many records and wasn't very well known, but they still allowed him to record 2 more albums after that. Brighter Later, he didn't do any touring for that, and then really kind of had a bit of a episode where he went off the deep end, and then took a little bit of time off, and then came back with the recording of Pink Moon, his 3rd record, which is a very short record. It's 28.
It's just under
minutes.
30 minutes. Somewhere.
And every second of this record is absolute just perfection of music. Of songwriting. I mean, this record, in my mind, you could not write a better singer-songwriter record on acoustic guitar.
It's purely acoustic guitar and vocals, besides those piano accents in the title track.
Totally contrasted from Brighter Later. He wanted to strip it down. It was a
reactionary move, but it was exactly what was needed, and recorded very quickly over a short period of time, very honestly, and the guitar work is just mesmerizing. The guitar work is incredible.
Yeah, he stepped up his game on it.
Oh, he definitely did. But also with and really he kind of had to, because that's most of what's there.
Right.
But his vocals also are just perfect.
Right.
They're so real. They're so, with nothing else in the way, his vocals communicate exactly what he was feeling in a way that's just indescribable. I mean, you just have to listen to it.
And one of the things we really haven't talked about yet is his lyrics. I mean,
True.
And it really comes out on Pink Moon, but there's a lot of really deep lyrical statements made that resonate with me when I listen to it, and makes me love the music even more. It also, I think, brings an authenticity to it, because everything's in alignment. The mood of the songs, the complexity of the arrangements and the instrumentation, just his technicality and how he plays and finger picks. He has a very unique style, and then his voice is so smooth and almost restrained at times. Yet he creates this intensity, and the lyrics just seem to match that perfectly. And really creates this wonderful sound.
I think one of the highlights of the album for me, so starting from the beginning, really like songs like the title track, Pink Moon, Road, Which Will, they still, it's funny because they're what I consider to almost be kind of like emotional chameleon songs. You can listen to it if you're in a sad mood, and it'll probably sound sad. You can listen to it in a happy mood, and it'll probably sound upbeat to you. I mean, it's like this neutral kind of do with it what you will, hear it how you will, kind of songwriting and performance that to me is just immaculate. It's you just don't see people do it that way anymore. But then it gets to the track Parasite.
Oh man.
And that song for me is like the turning point of the album.
Yeah.
And I'm getting like goosebumps
Yes.
just talking about that song, because it doesn't even take Nick Drake's vocals to come in before you hear it. That guitar starts going, and that guitar is just the most like dooming acoustic guitar you'll ever hear. Somehow it's like your own death knell. And then he starts singing, and the lyrics are extremely dark, and it's just the most gorgeous thing. Like that song blows me away. And there are a couple other darker songs like that on the back half of the album, mixed in with some more optimistic sounding ones. But I mean, man, the whole thing, the emotional range and the moods that he is able to accomplish with simply his voice and an acoustic guitar, you just don't hear people able to do that anymore.
No, it's a talent,
right?
And it's one of a kind. And Pink Moon is one of my favorite records of all time.
Same here.
I've just decided I have about a 25-minute drive home from Tom's house in where I'm at right now, and I plan on listening to this. I can
perfect length.
Almost get it all in.
Yeah.
In the drive home. After Pink Moon was released, Nick Drake really kind of fell victim to his depression. He spent a lot more time withdrawn from people, not being very social. People who were close to him went weeks without hearing from him, and when they did, he was very withdrawn. And then, there was one night he was taking some antidepressants and took too many. And it's not really known. Like, his family didn't really think that, like, he wanted to like kill himself, like went around pining to do that, and they kind of just suspected it was just like a whim. It wasn't premeditated at all, but unfortunately he passed away in 1974. And without ever achieving fame in his lifetime.
Right.
Without his music, he sold a few thousand copies, but it's not like today where we can, an artist with a laptop, armed with a laptop and, GarageBand or something like that can go in and make, an awesome album and then put it out there. And even if they only get a couple thousand listens, they can get direct feedback from that and kind of, fine tune their sound towards the direction that fans like. You can't do that.
Right.
You couldn't do that back in the early 1970s. So, Nick really didn't know that people loved his music. And, with his death, I don't know if it was a byproduct of his death. I would tend to think not, that somebody would find these albums at some point in time,
regardless,
and discover them. But, later on, a few years after he died, they released a compilation of a bunch of his songs and stuff, and I think it was called Fruit Tree, and that started to gain him a little bit of popularity. But it wasn't until later on, like the 1980s, where you had artists actually citing him as like a major driving influence. But since then, I mean, he has exploded in popularity. I mean, there's so much stuff out there written on him. There's even, and one thing I would recommend if you are interested in Nick Drake, on YouTube, you can view about a 48-minute documentary called Skin to Few. I highly recommend that. But there's so much that's been written and so much that has been said about Nick Drake and who he's influenced. Even the guy sitting next to me.
I readily admit most of my acoustic guitar style is just ripped off from Nick Drake. I love the guy.
I wouldn't say it's ripped off, but it's certainly influenced by that, and I think that's a good thing,
Yeah.
And,
because who better, really?
Right.
I mean, he's just great, and it's a shame that things worked out for him the way that it did. But at the same time, you almost can't imagine it being any other way. I mean, the problem is that if he was around today, if he was a new artist today, he would get overlooked. And also because of his personality, he would not approve of the celebrity kind of culture that we have, and he would not like the pressure that artists are put under.
No, he wouldn't want to be celebrated. He would he wouldn't want people to get to derive value from his music for them to have an emotional connection to it.
It's the way that he went about, communicating with the world, and it's absolutely beautiful.
Right.
But it's just a shame that it went down the way it did, because I mean, think about what he could have done through the rest of the 70s.
Right.
But I feel absolutely, lucky that the world has the 3 albums of his that it does, because they're irreplaceable.
What is your favorite song of Nick Drake?
Oh man. That's a tough question.
I love catching you off guard.
Yeah, I know you sure do. I'd probably have to say Parasite.
Parasite.
Or for personal reasons, I'd pick Which Will, because as you know, Jake, it's the song that my wife walked down the aisle to at our wedding.
Aw, it was. Yeah. It was great. It was
a lot of meaning to me. It was
a great choice. Mm-hmm. Mine would have to be Riverman.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Great song.
I've never heard a song. I mean, honestly, that might be like thinking of all the songs I've ever heard all at once. That's super meta. That probably is up there, at least in the top 10 of best songs I've heard from a composition standpoint.
Yeah.
So, curious, what's your guys' favorite Nick Drake song, favorite Nick Drake album, and what has Nick Drake meant to you? If you're a Nick Drake fan, if you're not a Nick Drake fan, go out there, listen to his albums. He has established, a connection with so many people over the years, since people started discovering Nick Drake, even after his death, and becoming more popular. There's just so much that he's brought to the world of music that if you haven't listened to Nick Drake, it's definitely something that you need to do. And then let us know what your feedback was, what your experience was at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or velocitiesandmusic@gmail.com. Also hit us up on Facebook. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. We're in iTunes now, so we definitely want to be able to give you guys our podcast there. And we'll still be posting on YouTube as long as we're around. Yeah. So I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are Velocities and Music, moving music discussion forward.